Well, good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning Yerushalmi Shavis, Pedikei Halacha Dalid. We're going to be learning today Daf Mem Aleph from the top of the Amid all the way to the end of this Pedik. We are referring to the din of the Mishnah that taught that one may not assist in the fruit preparation to someone or with someone who's suspect of violating Shvis. Now, what we did not clarify when we learned the Mishnah, even though I kept on mentioning that we're speaking about food after the time of Biur, that's one of the two options we'll have today presented in the beginning. But there are really two types of Shvius violators. One is a person who pashat plants on Shvius, and that food that was planted be'isur may not be used. Or even someone who's not suspect of actually working the land on Shvius. Again, you have another type of chashad ala shvius, which is a person who does not get rid of the food when and if there is a time of biur. That's also a problem of chashad ala shvius. And the first topic we're going to learn today in the Gemara is to clarify what type of chashad ala shvius is our Mishnah referring to. The second big topic today is going to be the following: that there is a Mishnah Masechtas Avodah Zarah that does not say what our Mishnah says. The Mishnah is also speaking about working with someone who is not reliable in Hilchos Tuma and Tara. I know here we're speaking about Shvias there, Tuma and Tara. By the way, our Mishnah also mentioned Tuma and Tara. Our Mishnah mentioned that you are allowed to lend a nafa, a kavara, a rechaim, and a tanur, as we just learned the beginning of the Gemara at the end of the last year, because these items, I know they are primarily used for food preparation, but they could be used, like we said, a nafa could be used, that if you want to count money, you need to have a little table, a COVID table. You can use a nafa into a little platform. So I can say the person is using it for that. In other words, our Mishnah said that the only Isur begins from when you mix the water and the flour. That was our Mishnah. In Masechtas Avodah Zarah, the Isur begins earlier. You may not even participate with them when they are beginning the first stages, and the Gemara is going to suggest two different ways of explaining the difference between here Masechtas Shvius and Masechtas Avodah Zarah, one from Rabbi Law, one from the Chavraya. There's a huge nafkamina between the two opinions, and that's going to lead us to speak a little bit about the obligation of separating challah. And when you ask someone, from when does the obligation of challah take place? From when does it take place? And actually, when we learned the Mishnah, I mentioned from when you mix the water and the flour, and that's not accurate. It's generally correct. Accurately is from when you begin to knead. And that little nuance is a big nuance, is not a little thing. Not from when you put the water in the flour. Before you began to knead, you still cannot say that there's the beginning of the chiyuv of taking off challah, because there is no dough at all. It's from the kneading, milisha ve'elach, and we'll see how all of that will play into the machlekes between Chavraya and Rabbi Law of how we differentiate between here and Masechtas Avodah Zarah. And finally, the last shtickle of this Pedek will be that the Mishnah concluded that you are allowed to be machzik, umachzikin yedei akum b'shvis, avoloy yedei Yisrael. So there's being machzik someone. Then the Mishnah says, Vishoy alim bishloiman. It's not even clear in the Mishnah, Vishoy alim bishloiman goes on the akum. That's obviously not obligated to keep shvius. Or maybe does the Vishoy alim bishloiman even go to the Yidei Yisrael? And the Mishnah's ending words are Mipnei Darkei Shalom. So is the Mipnei Darkei Shalom going on the Goyim? Or are we speaking about a Jew who's currently not yet keeping Shvius? And even to the Jew, V'shayalim b'shleiman, because of Darkei Shalom, it's a very important conclusion of the Pedek, and we will leave it at that. It's much beautiful.
Why a goy has a shayachus to Shvius?
I'm sorry?
Darkei Shalom. Why do we assume that for a goy, Darkei Shalom, if he's not shaykh le'shviz, the mitzvah shviz?
Very good, very good. The Mishnah doesn't say the words Darkei Shalom on machzikin yedei akon b'shviz. The Mishnah says machzikin yedei akon b'shviz. I'm reading the words avolo yedei Yisrael. And then the Mishnah says v'shayalan b'shleiman b'pnei Darkei Shalom. So we push it. We will exactly. Does it go to the goy? Does it go to the yid? Now, but you can say b'chlal loisi chanim. Don't forget there is a love of loisi chanim. Pashas v'eschanan, I think, and loisi chanim is not, even though in explicitly we're speaking about the 7 nations. It goes to all the non-yidden, and not giving to them anything for free might have included wishing them well for free. But we do that mepnei darkei shalom. So it is shaykh, not because of the shvius part. It's just about greeting, about behaving in a civil way, not to create animosity or to promote a peace. When you ask about someone's welfare, by the way, asking v'shayalim b'shleimim, when in America, when we say how are you, not I care, not I want to know. Imagine if you ask a person how are you and they would tell you the truth, you would run away from them. You understand? I think v'shayalim b'shleimim is more than just greetings. It's actually blessing them with shalom. And shalom is one of the names of Hashem. It's a big thing to wish a person shalom aleichem. Okay, we're going to get there. We'll get there when we get there. Chevra daf mem aleph amid aleph, the top line of the amid. So here we go. At some point, the Mishnah says, in other words, I can lend them the food utensils. May the Eishes Yisrael lend to the Eishes HaChoshut al Shvis. That's the Mishnah. May they lend them the Nafa, the Kvara, yeah. The Mishnah says, yeah. But the moment they are preparing the food, our Mishnah, on Shvis, not only when they need, the moment the Eishes of the person who's chashuda al shvis is beginning to prepare the food way before the kneading, the Eishes Yisrael is already not a lot of help. That is by shvis. And then the Mishnah went, when it comes b'chlal to the Eishes chaver, to the Eishes ha'ma'aretz, we already learned that. And the issue is because of tum and tara. There, the problem is only from when mishit tital hamayim. Prior to tital hamayim, I'm allowed to work with the Eishes ha'ma'aretz, even though they are b'cheskas tuma, their kelim are b'cheskas tuma. That's our Mishnah. So beginning with shvis, the moment they begin to prepare the food proper, the Eishes of a yid who's keeping the mitzvahs is not allowed to participate in, not allowed to help in the preparing of the food because they are chshud ala shvis. Now, what type of chshad are we talking about? That's the first topic we'll have today. So Rav Pinchas boyi b'makin nasoy. In other words, me not being allowed to help the person who is chashut ala shvis is a knas for them. Since they're chashut ala shvis, they're not going to get assistance from people that are observant. Now, what type of chashash are we talking about? Is it b'makom shezoyrin ve'oichlin, that we suspect them for 2 things? Number 1, that they push it, that they're zoreya, that they plant on shvis, and therefore the food that they have might be food that was planted and harvested on shvis, or and ve'oichlin. Ve'oichlin means even if they're not farmers, but they are people that might buy food, even beheter, or gather food, for sure beheter, on shvis. You can buy mazon shalashudas. You can gather it mina hefker from everyone, shalashudas. But you always have to have in mind that this product, if it's a product that's subject to biur, bisman habiur, you have to get rid of it. Leramban, doesn't matter how, you have to do biur. People that did not do biur, bisman habiur, then afterwards that food is a problem. So is it both? Is it both a person who's suspect of planting and of eating food after Zman HaBiur? Look inside the Pnei Moshe, 2 lines from the top. We'll learn the Pnei Moshes on the shtickle of Rav Pinchas. B'makom shezoyren ve'oichlem koloymar im b'shnei hamakoymas konsu. It's not both. It's either or. B'makom hachashudim al azriya b'shvis. To such a person, you may not participate or help or assist while they are already preparing the food from the earliest stage on, and even if we're speaking about people that they're not going to go so bad. You know, we just learned a few days ago that many people that were chashad ala shvius, they were ashamed to violate shvius in public. Planting on shvius, it's almost like being machal Shabbos beferesya. That's a much worse level of currently not caring to keep the mitzvahs and not ashamed. A person who doesn't get rid of the food b'zman habiyur is not such a heavy violation. In other words, even for people that are not chashudim al azriya, elo shechashudin ein sheoichlin peidah shvius acher habiyur gam kein konsu. Okay, that's option number one. Keep your finger in the Pnei Moshe, where are 6 lines in the top of the Pnei Moshe, back in the Gemara. Or the cheshad is only for people that are zoydin. But we're not going to penalize to the fact that you can't even assist them to the people that are oichlin. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. Oy b'makom shuzanim v'lo yoichlin koloymar oy dilma dafke b'makom shehem chashudim al azriya. Wow. There who the consul. The Ika lemechash tvei, people who planned on Shvi'is, Shema mi peiroi shenizru b'Shvi'isei. There's a higher chance for people who actually seed the land and harvest also on Shvi'is that they have food that should not have been it. But maybe v'loi konsu b'makim she'oichlin bilvad, but to the people that are not chashudim al azriya, there we won't go so far to tell them you can't assist them. Why not? Because the kivan she'enam chashudim lizraya lo ishchichi peirah shvi'is kol kach. Don't forget, if you're not allowed to plant on shvi'is, people that do that, they definitely get ready on the 6th year and they store food for the 7th year. So even if they don't keep the dinim of biur, but there's still a chance and a high chance that they have in their homes peiros from the 6th year. And therefore, vitolinon lekula shema mimakim heter hein. Interesting way of the way the Pnei Moshe explains it. In other words, not because they're not public violators. That will be another whole approach. People that are violating Shvi'is in public should be penalized more. No, it's not about that. It's about what are the chances if I go into my neighbor and my neighbor is chashud ala Shvi'is, and the Mishnah says you can't assist them when they begin, even when they begin preparing the food. Why not? Because maybe the food is food of Shvi'is, if that's the only issue, not because the person is a violator, but because the food is prohibited. Now, how do I know that the food that they are working with, how do I know it's from Shvi'is? I don't know that. So if it's a person that both is Oireya and Oichel, there's a much higher chance. Maybe only there did the Mishnah penalize. Or Oidilma, no, even if a person does not keep the laws of Biur, which means that they don't plant, which means that in their home there is a lot of heterodyka food, even after Zman HaBiur, food from the 6th year is not subject to Biur. Still there, the Chazal said, this person is Chashad al Shvi'is. There is a chance. Even there you may not assist him. That's the nafkamina. And my nafak mi b'nein, in the Bavli, that will be lamai nafkamina. Very simple. Says the Gemara that ra'u oisoy lokeach min asirki. Sirki is a person who's not a farmer. Sirki is a merchant, a grain merchant. If the chashud al Shvi'is bought product from the Sirki, so in Teimar, that only b'makom shezoyrin ve'oichlin is where Chazal gave this penalty that you may not assist in this chashud. So then, ra'u oisoy lokeach min asirki asur. Interesting chevra. The Sirki, I want to tell you something, is not suspect of selling forbidden Shvi'is produce. Not suspect. Sirki would not do that. But you know what the Sirki would do? What's possible? It's possible that the Sirki will sell food that is subject to Biur. Why not? I'm allowed to own food that grew this year in many circumstances, even foods that will be subject to Biur. So if it's either or, so even in a scenario where it's only foods that might be subject to Shvi'is, that's the way we're learning it, it will also be Asur. Look inside the Pnei Moshe, already towards the end of the narrow lines. A person who's selling little bits at the time. Inami, Sirki means that we're trying to understand why would it even be mutter to sell Peter Shvi'is. So either because they sell small quantities, or because Sirki refers to a goy. Inami Sirki Nikra Soicher Yishmael in Talmud Yerushalmi Bashas Hazeh. It's literally Sirki means a merchant. In Yerushalmi, whenever they mention Sirki, I mean, he knew the Yerushalmi, it's referring to a non-Jewish one. So the in Tamar b'makim shezoyren u'b'makim she'oichlin bilvad gamken konsu.
So are we learning that a Jew is allowed to sell Shvi's product?
Mazon shalosh seudas. Yeah, we already learned that. I'm allowed to sell mazon shalosh seudas, but yeah. In Cain, guys, we're in the Pnei Moshe, the second medium-sized line. That's the way we're going to learn. We're learning the Gemara the way he's learning it. Nami asur. Because if it's either or, okay. So enachanami, we're not saying that the Sidiki is selling you food that is asur. A goy can work the land on shvius, and then you can buy it from the goy. But those foods are subject to beer. Oh, but in Tamar, keep your finger. B'makim shezoyren ve'ein oichlin. If it's only, in other words, if it's, the wording is difficult. If the isur is only option number 2, the problem is even on biur, then even when you buy it from the sirki, the food is subject to biur. The person is chashud not to keeping biur. You may not assist him. But in teim b'makim shezoyren ve'ein oichlin. If we need to also suspect them of sowing, and if there is no chashash that this was planted, there is no issue. So ro oiser lekech menasirki, it's going to be mutter. Look inside the Pnei Moshe. Aval im Tamar, the third line under the Gemara. Aval im Tamar b'makim shezoyren dafka hu the konsu. You have to have that aspect. Then ein oichlin koloimer. Means that if it's only to a person that's subject on beard, there is no penalty of not assisting. The first widest line in the Pnei Moshe is like, because the toilen, because we're going to say the chances, how do you know even that what the Sirki sold him was subject to be? You don't know that. Could be yeah, could be not. So that's his inquiry. In other words, very simple. When a person is chashad al shviz, how do I know when I go into their home that the food that they are working with currently, that food is problematic food? I don't know that. One thing is clear from Rav Pinchas's both sides. He makes something clear. Don't think we penalize the person. Because if we penalize the person, if that would be the logic over here, it would make no difference whether the food itself is problematic or not. There would be a way of understanding the Mishnah that if the person is chashad on shviyas, don't help that person on shviyas. That Pinchas is making it clear, no, we're not saying not to help a Jew that's chashad al shviyas. What we are saying is if you observe shviyas, don't work with food that's asur. Question is, how do you know this food is asur? So maybe there has to be a higher chance. Where will there be a higher chance if this is a Jew that both plants and he doesn't keep the dinim of biur? In that home, there's a higher chance that the food that you are eating is shvius food that may not have come to be here, b'chlal, or may not be here right now. If it's a person that only doesn't keep biur, it's a much lesser chance. Maybe the Chazal were goyzer, even if there's a lesser chance. Don't take any chance. That's his inquiry, and this is a boya. The lo yifshita here in the Yerushalmi. Okay, now back in the Gemara. V'kulam lo yamru ella, when the Mishnah says ella mepnei darkei shalom. Going back to the first stanza in the Mishnah, that I'm allowed to lend to the ashes of a chashuda. I'm allowed to lend a nafa and a kvara and a rechaim and a tanur. And a big stretch, right? When we learned, right, what was the look on top of Daf Mem Aleph? How can I lend the oven? Yeah, I can lend the oven because maybe they're getting the oven only to dry flax. Most people bake food in the oven. So in other words, so all of that was because of Darkei Shalom. So Rabbi Yosi Bar Chanina Boyi Al Kol Pirka Di Is Amart was this Mepnei Darkei Shalom. On the other dinim that we learned in this Perek, which is referring back to the previous Mishnah, I'll remind everyone in a minute the dinim of the previous Mishnah. Is it even for that? Or maybe when the Mishnah said, V'kulam lo yamru el mepnei darkei shalom, this was only on the din of the nafa and the kavara and the rechaim v'tanur. Let me give you just a reminder. We have to chazer. One of the things we learned, not in this last liner, I'm allowed to sell a hand sickle. Let me go back to the pata, right? You learned this whole sugya the last year, the sugya of Bava Basra. I am allowed to sell or to lend a cow that's a pata chayreshes, beisilul. Why? So beisilul, maybe he's going to shecht it. Is that also? No, it's now the Mishnah did not say over there that mepnei darkei shalom we can be so toila leheteda. The Mishnah did not say it over there. The Mishnah said this one-liner over here. So that's the Gemara's kash. Very simple. You can lend to even an Eishes Chaved, even in our Mishnah. You can lend her a sa'a measure. Even though many people would use these measures before they would store food, which you're not allowed to store, pay the shvias, that's the way it would work. When you put something into storage, you organize it. How much is it? What's the quantity? I'm not allowed to be misayeya, someone who's storing food by them, giving them my measuring utensil. In other words, then, could be they need a saw utensil because they're baking a big challah. Like here also, we're being lenient. Does the mepnei darkei shalom go on everything, or does it only go on the nafa kvara rechaim and tanur? That's the Gemara's kash. So says the Gemara, Rabbanan de Keisaran b'shem Rabbi Yehuda bar Titas. They know we answered this inquiry. Min man the law taninon begitin ela hadahil chesem. Guys, let's go back in Masechtas Gittin in the Babli, and I'm going to go to the Mishnayos in. It's a few. We begin here on Daf Nun Tes Amud Aleph, and let me read the Mishnah. That was a whole series. The Mishnah says, "Elu dvarim she'amru mepnei darkei shalom." First, says the Mishnah that koyin rishon va'achrav levi va'achrav Yisrael. Hashgacha pratzis we had in our shul a koyin just recently. Punkt that day really happens. We had a few chiyuvim here. Mamish chiyuvim, yard sites, and whatever. Danny is shaking his head. The Gabbai, not Danny, not the Gabbai, a Gabbai decided b'reshus kayhanim. They're talking about it on Me'evel Hayardin over there. So you see, it's not a joke. Some people get very offended. You got to be careful. They forgot the Mishnah. Mipnei darkei shalom is you call up the kohen. That's it. Then the Mishnah says that ma'arvin bebayis yashman b'darkei shalom. A whole Mishnah of darkei shalom. And let me go further. Now I'm going to Daf Samach Aleph. Daf Samach Aleph, guys, in Gittin. The Mishnah says like this: Misha'eles or Mash'eles isha lachaverto achashud al shvius. It's mamish our Mishnah. Nafa ukevara rechayim v'tanur aval loisavar v'loisitchanima. It's mamish a repetition. Then the Mishnah continues there, like here. When it comes to the issue of Tumantara, like our Mishnah, not only could she lend the utensil, she can even begin the food prep. Begin. So Gavaldik, you want to know whether our Mishnah's Mepnei Darkei Shalom is only going on the Naf and the Kavara, or is it going to all of the other dinim that we had in this Mishnah and in the previous Mishnah? In Masechtas Gittin, where we're mentioning all of the Darkei Shaloms, the only thing that's mentioned is the Naf and the Kavara and the Rechaim and Tanur. The only din from the series that are mentioned here, which are mamish repeated verbatim in Masechtas Gittin, the only one mentioned in the Sugya of Darkei Shalom is this final one, the Naf and the Kavara, is Araya, Hada Amra, Al Hada Hilchase is Amart. It was only said regarding this. And I'll tell you, I understand why. And everyone had this reaction. I just think that we're learning this Monday morning. We learned the last year Sunday. The stretch to say that I'm lending a nafa for people to count money on top. That's the biggest stretch. Even when it comes to a parah chayreshes, people need to eat. Yeah, it's a money loss. It's the biggest heter was on these four. That you're going to use it for something that's mamish not the usual way to use it. A cow is meant for both. I know it's mainly a parah chereshes is meant to plow. At some point, you're going to eat a cow. But here, it's the biggest stretch. And why do we do that? Mepnei darkei shalom. Okay. And now, like we mentioned, now we have a stira. The stira is, in our Mishnah, we just quoted again from Masechtas Gittin. It's mamish the same words. That when it comes to lending items to an Eishes Am Ha'aretz, we learned this in Masechtas Damai. The issue of Am Ha'aretz is that they are becheskas tuma and their kalim are tamei. Now I want to add another detail. In Eretz Yisrael, in the Holy Land, Chazal said that we're not allowed to be metama oichlin. Before that isur, the rabbanon of being metama oichlin, if it's not truma and not kachim, there would be no isur. You can eat it betuma, you can make it tamei. I'm not talking about the challah part. That's something else, because once you have a dough from which you have to remove challah, challah is truma. Now, if it's already tamei, you have to remove it anyways and give it to a kohen, and the kohen can use it for fuel. He'll burn it. But lachatchila, you're not allowed to be metama kachim. That's for sure. Midoiraisa, you can be metama chula. But midrabanan, you cannot. So therefore, if someone is chashuda on the dinim of tuma and tara, so don't participate when they prepare food. That's what our Mishnah says. From what point? Only from when they put the water in the flour. Now there's a big problem. In Avodah Zarah, Tamon, Tanin, in the Masechtas Avodah Zarah, we learned Nachtaim Shu Oisa Betumam. Now we're going to come back to the Nachtaim in a moment. I know Nachtaim means a baker, but we're going to this is going to be a big key. Let's just type simple. That when a baker is someone like an Am Ha'aretz, he doesn't care about tumantara, which would mean either he's tamei or his utensils are tamei or both are tamei. So the Mishnah says loy loshin v'loy archen imoy. You're not allowed to knead the dough with him. You're not allowed to shape a already kneaded dough with him. Period. So the Mishnah actually is speaking about a stage after you added water. Right? Or you can't knead. Don't confuse these two steps. Adding water is prior kneading. You add water, then you knead, then you shape the dough. When you learn the Mishnah is Mama Shalom al Yisrael, the problem is Vatani Allah. We learned in a Braisa that elaborates, and the Braisa clarifies that the issue of me not helping a nachtoim that is making food betuma is from before the lisha, already way before. Leiboidin. That's when you have to sort out the bad kernels from the good kernels. Nor tchina is the grinding. Menachtim is the sifting. Ooh. That already from that point, you can't help the nachtoim. That's oisa betuma. That's a clear stira to our Mishnah and the Mishnah we just quoted in Gittin. Our Mishnah says, regarding tum and tara, that the isur starts, mishatotel mayim, means all of the steps of the food prep prior to adding the water and the flour, which would mean the boited, which would mean the toichen, which would mean the rikut. All of these things are done before you add the water. You are allowed to help. Now, I want to say like this. The objective is the same. Just to make it clear. The objective is that I am not allowed to assist or to participate when someone is contaminating produce. The question is, from what point do we have a problem? How do you reconcile that? So there's two different approaches. So Amar Rabla, that's Elah, we're going to call him Rabla with on the Aleph. Very simple. And this is based on a premise that we'll get to in a moment. That our Mishnah means Mesechtas Shvis. Our Mishnah means the Mishnah Mesechtas Gittin. We're speaking about produce that to begin with is chulin. Now, let's stand our ground. Being metame chulin in Eretz Yisrael is asur midrabanan. True. But to go ad kedei kach, to say that it's asur for me to participate in, to be misayeya, we don't go that far. Ad kedei kach. Someone who's being metame, something that is asur to be metame midoiraisa, which would be truma, which would be kachim. Here is where we say, if that person is violating a biblical violation, I'm not allowed to participate with him at all. Very simple. But the only question will be is, if kan is lechulin, and if we're speaking about chulin, so why mishetitol mayim, why do we have a problem? And that's the answer. The answer is that since in every dough, a dough of chulin, there is a chalois chiyuv of removing challah Challah has a status of truma mamish, even though I didn't yet remove the challah. Now make no mistake, if my dough is tameh, when I will remove the challah will be tameh. I'll have to remove it and I'll have to give it to a kohen, but the kohen will have a big limitation. Don't forget, guys, truma tameya is not asur b'hana. Adarabah, truma tameya is used for fuel or for heat or for light. It has to be burnt, not just burnt like chametz. Chametz on Pesach is being burnt because you can't have any hana from it. Truma is being burnt to use its fuel. The kohen would be the one who gets that benefit, but I'm not allowed to be metama truma. And not only that, from the moment that there is already the potential of challah, which is, now that will be, what I'm saying now doesn't fit at the end. Mishatital hamayim, or using the words in Mesechtas Avodah Zarah, lush and lisha, from the lisha, that's why you can't be machzik yedei oivrei aveda, because there's already a doiraisa component. That's a Rabbi's answer. It's a beautiful word. In other words, you have to differentiate between the doiraisa and the rabbanan. And we're not, God forbid, minimizing the rabbanan. We are saying that if someone is not adhering to an isur the rabbanan, Chazal did not say, don't be misayeh. We don't go that far. So kan l'chulin. And therefore, the issue is only when there is already chala involved. Not chala mamish, but here mishatit alamayim, or the words in Mesechtas Avodah Zarah, loshin, in the Mishnah, not the Braisa, loshin, lisha. However, kan, the last word of the Amid, kan meaning in a Mesechtas Avodah Zarah, where the whole Braisa that adds v'tana Allah loy bodin v'loy teichen v'loy meraktin. I'll tell you why. They're speaking about truma. Very good. In other words, a big chiluk this. You're not allowed to assist a violator of an Isur Doiraisa. You are allowed to assist someone who's being violating an Isur. Now, I want to make it clear. Why would I be allowed to assist someone who's being violating Isur Darabanan? B'pnei darkei shalom. There's a reason for that. Nishtam. Yeah, there's a balance over here. But that's a very logical difference. Okay. Says the Gemara, I got a problem with that. Because don't forget that the Mishnah, not the Tani Allah. The Mishnah didn't say loy loshin. The Mishnah only said loy loshin. That's the thing. The Mishnah didn't go beyond that. The Braisa was the one that says loy boiderin v'loy treichen v'loy meraktin. Aber nachtoim. Now who's the nachtoim? Guys, remember something. Look inside the top of Asher Elio. Nachtoim l'chol ha'olam oisepas. Right, which means shekoina mimenu hapaltet. Nachtoim is someone who sold it to a baker. Today, I think a baker and a nachtoim, you think about a baker, you think about a nachtoim. No. When I say baker, I meant a bakery. Nachtoim is big. The way it worked, people, their business was, they were bakers. They sold it to the palter. The palter sold it in the store. It doesn't make sense, guys, for a nachtoim to be baking a truma. People whose parnasa is wholesale, they make a couple of prutas over every loaf of bread. They have to sell to many people. They're not going to be baking truma. They're going to be breaking chulin. It doesn't make sense. In other words, if the Mishnah is speaking about an individual, you go to someone's house, the house of a kohen. Yeah, of course it makes sense. If someone is a kohen, and they are an Amma Aretz, which means that midrabanan their truma is tamei. There's an isur to be metame more truma midoy raisa. The concept, so you can't be misayeh. That would make sense. Doesn't fit with the word nachtoim. See, even a paltet, it would make more sense. It could be there was a paltet for kohanim, not nachtoim. The bigger the quantity, it doesn't work. These big quantities only with truma. So Rabbi is rejected. And therefore, Chavraya have a whole different approach. Chavraya is everyone else. The Chevre, Khan, now the Khan and the Khan are different. Khan over here in Avodah Zarah, Libraisa, you can't already start in the earlier stages. Beloy says, very simple. Guys, let's remind ourselves, right? We're just 2 weeks off Parsha Shmini, that we learned many times. It's all of the Chitas really gave us all of the basis of all of the dinim of Tum and Tara. That for something that's food that grew from the ground, for it to become susceptible to becoming tamei, Number one, it has to be disconnected from the ground. And number two, after that, you have to have any one of the 7 liquids, kiyutan, kiyitain, with all of the chazals on it. Not that you put it, but it was put l'ritzoin cha of the owner. Now, let's think about matzah shmura. What, matzah shmura doesn't mean hand-baked matzahs, right? It's shmura that no water touched the kernels. Because kernels that are cracked, that have water connected to them, it's machmitz the kernel. Even though later, if you grind it before Pesach, it could become bottle, but that's a whole different topic. But I'm saying, if the kernels of grain did not become wet after the harvest, they are not susceptible to becoming tamei. When do they become susceptible to becoming tamei? Mishetatel mayim. Forget about challah. That's gavaldik. In other words, when do we say in Masechtas Avodah Zarah, the Braisa says, not only mishetitel mayim, don't be baited with them. Of course, if you have kernels, loisis means that the kernels were moistened prior to the process of making them into flour. By the way, this was done on purpose. This was done kiyitain, because there's residue of dust on the kernels. And if the goal is not to have more pounds to make more money, but if you want to have a clean flour, clean bread, you want to clean out all of the impurities. And one of the steps that they would do is that they would moisten the kernels, and it would take away all of the afar, va'efar, whatever else is on the little kernel. So if there was lesisa done to the kernels, which means that they were made wet with the willingness of the owner prior to making the dough, so they are susceptible to becoming tamei. And therefore, there's an isur to be misayeh. According to the Chavraya, it makes no difference, isur da'iraisa, no difference, isur da'rabanan. Don't forget that Ama'aretz, the Nachtem Ama'aretz, or over here, we're not talking about someone who we know is tamei. We're speaking about someone who's tamei midrabanan, tumas da'rabanan of an Ama'aretz. And you cannot be Messiah, even, and they are not allowed to be Metamei Chulin Beretz Yisrael, also Midrabanan, and I cannot help them. Very simple. The Khan over here, meaning in Masechta Shvis. Here, meaning in Masechta Gitin, V'she'eno loises. Since it's she'eno loises, it's not even susceptible. What do you care if you help them? Eloma, once you add the water, now it's Mukhshal Kabal Tuma. And indeed, now this is the Raya of the Chavraya. Our Mishnah is a Messiah Lechavraya, because our Mishnah in Masechtas Gitin, Rabbi Lo can still squeeze his answer, because the Mishnah, not the Braisa, the Mishnah says Loi Loshin. You're right. The whole idea that Loshin, wow, once you're Losh, now there's a Chalois Chi of Chala. Chala is Truma, Chala is Doiraisa. So now it's a Isser Doiraisa. That's Takam Loshin. Our Mishnah didn't say Loshin. Our Mishnah says Ava Mishnah Total Mayim. Loisiga etzla. Forget about Gittin. I meant to say the Mishnah Avodah Zarah said loshin. The Braisa says loy boidedim. Here we say water. Loisiga etzla. Because she'ein machzik in yedei oivri aveda. According to Rabbi Law, our Mishnah should have said from Lisha you cannot help them. Because before you begin kneading, even after you put water in the flour, you can't say that the chiyuv of challah began. It did not begin. Challah is from a dough. Water added into flour doesn't make dough. The dough begins when you begin to knead. That's gavaldik. That taka proves the Chavraya right. And now let's finish the Gemara. Let's finish the Perek. Says the Mishnah. It says the Gemara, going back to the Mishnah. Now again, we said the Mishnah said two things. Machzikin yedei oivre akum b'shviyis avalolo yedei Yisrael v'shayalan b'shleiman mipnei darkei shalom. So what's machzik yad and what's sheila shalom? First, let's differentiate that. So machloikes Rab Chiya v'Ravimi Chad Amar like this. Machzik yad. What does machzik yad means? Charoish lo tovus. When you see the goy working on shvius, and a goy is allowed to work on shvius, machzik yad is not begashmi is to help him. It means to verbally encourage the specific work he's doing. Plow well. A Jew is not allowed to plow. Not a problem. I'm not plowing. I'm being machzik the yad akum. That's the meaning. However, the other one, either Rav Achia or Rav Imi says no. That machzik yad, even machzik yad, you can't tell a guy plow gesund to hate, because I'm not allowed to plow. You can tell him ishar. may you be strengthened. Now, there's a big nafkamina, because if machzik means to tell him, plow good, so then the next line, V'shei alan b'shleiman, could mean to tell him, isha. If machzik means be well, so what's the V'shei alan b'shleiman? That's Shialam b'shleiman. So now says the Gemara, man the Amar Tavos, one, this machlokes automatically will spill over to a given, it has to be machlokes in the last line of the Mishnah. If machzik yad means to tell him plow well, Tavos means toiv, well, but it means plow well, you're specifying the avodah. So Shalom b'shleiman means ishar, may you be strengthened. But man the Amar, that the one that says that to a goy, you're not allowed to tell a goy plow well, even though a goy is allowed to plow. I'm not allowed to plow. The machzik yad means to encourage him verbally, be well, yishad, be strengthened. So what sheyalam b'shleiman? Sham b'shleim must mean that you can b'shleim Yisrael. So according to him, v'sheyalam b'shleimim is going to a Jew, that I am allowed to greet a Jew who's not yet keeping Shemitah by saying Shalom Aleichem. V'sheyalam b'shleim Yisrael. Wow. Here you see the roots of the Baal Shem Tov and of all of us who are fortunate to belong to Hadassah Hasidim, that understand the importance of greeting every single Jew, no matter where they're at, even if they're not currently keeping the mitzvahs. So Dalma means Amaisem, Rab Chanina bar Papa, Rab Shmuel bar Nachman, Avrun al Chad Mechorish Shviz. They walked by a Jew who was plowing his land on Shviz. Amalei Rab Shmuel bar Nachman, he sees a Yid and he tells him, Yishar, be well, be strengthened. Amalei Rab Chanina bar Papa, Rabbi, hold on. Is it not the right way? And we are quoting a pasuk in Tehillim, Kapitel Kuf Chav Tes. The words are that V'loy Amru ha'oivrim. He understood ha'oivrim means the transgressors, those sinners. Birchas Hashem aleichem. Don't tell to an oiver, may God be with you. Especially using the word Shalom aleichem is a big bracha. So that v'loy chein alfan Rabbi, that v'loy amru ha'ivrim birchas Hashem aleichem means that l'chayre she'asur loyme l'chayre she'shviyas ishar. You can't tell a Jew that's violating shviyas, be well. Amalei, so he told him, here's a chayin ivra, you know, but you have no understanding, but you don't know how to darshu psukim. Amalei, the irony. So he was very, you are very benevolent with the sinner, but with your colleague who's a scholar, you're very gevuradik. And by the way, that's the way it works. The Rebbe would smile at a Yid that came the first time to 770, and to the Bacher, Achsidish Bacher, it was a whole different attitude. And Azoy Gaitas, right? Because the closer you are, the more you are able to handle, and therefore it's expected of you to handle more emes, chesed ve'emes. Chesed to one and emes to the other. And if you get the emes, then you're fortunate. That means that you are worthy. So Amalei, likreis ato yedea. You know how to read. Lidreish ein ato yedea. You don't know how to type. You don't understand what you're reading. But when it says in this pasuk, amru ha'oivrim, oivrim is not the sinner. Oivrim means those who are passerbys. Passerbys means people whose existence is only temporary. And that refers to the non-Yidden versus the Jews who are here permanently. To them is where you don't say Birchas Hashem Aleichem. It doesn't even go what you tell to them. That the people, the Goyim never, why are the Goyim called Oivrim? Because they're not here forever. Because they are here temporary. And they never told the Jews as they should, Birchas Hashem Aleichem. What does that mean? What does that mean? All of the blessings in the world are here for the Yidden to keep the mitzvahs. So when they should be going around and thanking the Jewish people for everything that they have. And not only do they not do that, they not tax us. They make it worse for us. That's the meaning of the pasuk. That the Oivrim, the non-Jews, never told the Yidden Birchas Hashem Aleichem. Ma Yisrael Oimim Lahem. You know what we tell them when they make us what we tell them, what we should tell them, what we're telling them right now, that you should know. Berachnu eschem b'shem Hashem. That we bless you. We, the Jewish people, bless the whole world. Loy dayechem. Not only shekol habrachos habois la'olam is b'zchuseinu. That's a fact. It's not that you go and you properly reciprocate by telling the Jewish people, acknowledge the emes and share the bounty with us because you have it in our merit. Not only do you not do that, but pisim and zemiois and golgoliois and arnoininois, the federal tax and the state tax and the county tax and the income tax and the other tax and all the taxes. That's what you do to us. That's the meaning of the pasuk. But for you to tell a Jew who's violating the mitzvahs, you are allowed to greet him. And Rabbi, he saw a Jew that's violating shvius, and he told him, b'shalom aleich, isha. And that's the attitude we have to have. We have to feel close to every single Jew. And on that we say, Hadran Allah b'nai shuach, and God willing, tomorrow we are beginning the fifth